Good morning. Good morning. Could I ask you to take your seats, please? Please find a seat. So good morning, everybody. My name is Toby Dalton, and along with my colleagues from the Nuclear Policy Program at the Carnegie Endowment, I want to welcome you to the 2015 conference, which we're also calling NukeFest 2015. We've worked very hard to put together a great program for the next 2 days, and we hope that you can enjoy it in full. We have an agenda that covers the waterfront of issues from nonproliferation and nuclear energy to disarmament and deterrence, and we have an audience comprised of scholars and analysts, government officials, journalists, students from 42 countries and 3 international organizations. These really are the ingredients for an event with global perspective. Now, this is an established conference. This is the 16th time that has been convened, and our objectives remain quite simple. We want to highlight contemporary policy debates while also anticipating future challenges. We want to feature diverse perspectives from around the world, including those that are slightly outside mainstream opinion. And we want to create an environment that allows participants to connect with colleagues and to renew connections with colleagues and make new connections as well. We also try to innovate where we can, and for those of you who've been here before, you'll notice that we're in a new space. For many years, the conference had been down the hall. We've moved a few hundred yards, but we wanted to take advantage of this nice atrium outside, which gives more space for the exhibitors and for socializing. Another new feature this year that I'm personally very excited about is an espresso bar that we call the Pit Stop. And it's located just above the atrium and the Oculus. The coffees there are complimentary. I'll be there early and often. The other major innovation this year is the smartphone app. Many of you have already embraced it and are finding that it adds a new dimension to the proceedings. Not only does it have the latest agenda and information on speakers, exhibitors, and more, it also facilitates networking and sharing of perspectives. By the end of the day on Tuesday, we hope that even the technophobes among you will be using it. And for those of you whose phones aren't sufficiently smart, I'm looking at you, BlackBerry users out there, you can borrow an iPad at the app help desk. I would highlight that we will use the app for live polling in a session on Tuesday afternoon that we're calling Proliferation Prognostication. And we want maximum participation. So please download the app now and try it out before the session starts on Tuesday afternoon. The last point I'd like to make this morning is to underscore that a conference on this scale is a significant financial undertaking. We could not organize it without substantial support from foundations and governments that share our interest in an effective international nuclear order, all of whom are listed on page 3 of the program. We are most thankful for their generosity and fellowship. If you see representatives of these organizations around the conference, please give your thanks as well. Even with this support, as well as the modest registration fees that we charge, the conference is something of a lost leader for Carnegie, and we have to make up the deficit from funds drawn from Carnegie's endowment. We are grateful that our bosses continue to support the conference and the time that we devote to it. Speaking of bosses, it gives me great pleasure to now introduce someone who really needs no introduction, Ambassador William J. Burns. After a highly decorated Foreign Service career, which you can read about in full on the app, I would add, he became president of the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace in February. Now, nearly 2 months in the seat, during which time we've kept him incredibly busy, and he's probably wondering what happened to the cushy think tank job he thought he had signed up for. We're very pleased that he's with us here today. I now invite Ambassador Bill Burns to the podium.
Good Good morning, everyone. Let me begin by congratulating Toby and his colleagues for putting together another extraordinary conference this year. It's no small feat to organize the year's wonkiest conference, but you all have it down to a science. My only issue is with your timing. After all, the nuclear landscape seems eerily calm these days. It's not as if nuclear negotiations between longtime adversaries were reaching their moment of truth, or that we were in the midst of a dangerous crisis involving the world's two biggest nuclear powers, or that a rogue regime was testing nuclear weapons and threatening nuclear war. The reality, as all of you know very well, is that all of these things are happening as we speak, and they all underscore the fragility of the nonproliferation regime. But they're also a reminder of the regime's resilience. Our worst fears about the pace and scale of nuclear proliferation have not come to pass. The number of states actively participating in initiatives to strengthen nuclear security has never been higher. And the Nuclear Nonproliferation Treaty, for all of its imperfections, has largely stood the test of time. This is not just a product of chance and circumstance. It's the product of far-sighted leadership, courage, and imagination. As President Obama urged in Prague 6 years ago, we have to summon these same qualities today. We have to avoid the temptations of complacency and fatalism, and we have to reshape proactively the global nuclear order before unpredictable and uncontrollable events reshape it for us. Over the next 2 days, we will cover nearly every dimension of the nuclear challenge. This morning, I'd like to offer just a few introductory remarks about two of these dimensions, the crisis with Russia and Iran's nuclear program. There is no question that Russia's aggression in Ukraine is a brazen violation of international law and of Moscow's obligation to respect the sovereignty, territorial integrity, and independence of its neighbors. No amount of Russian posturing can obscure that fact. Russia's annexation of Crimea, its intervention in eastern Ukraine, its threatening behavior against its neighbors, and its noncompliance with the Intermediate-Range Nuclear Forces Treaty pose the biggest threat to the vision of a Europe that is whole, free, and at peace since the end of the Cold War. We have to be clear-eyed and honest about that undeniable and unfortunate reality. But we also have to be clear-eyed about another undeniable reality. As vexing and threatening as Putin's Russia has become, it remains a consequential player, still a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council and still the keeper of the world's biggest nuclear arsenal. I spent a good deal of my checkered diplomatic career helping administrations of both parties navigate the complexities of the US-Russian relationship. My hair is gray for a reason. I've lived through moments of great promise in that relationship, as well as periods of very sharp differences. Through it all, I've tried my best to keep focused on what's at stake for America's own interests. In the coldest days of the Cold War, the United States and Russia worked together to lay the foundations of the global nuclear order. And in better days, we worked together to strengthen it by creating communication and transparency measures to stabilize our relationship, reducing our weapons stockpiles, strengthening the IAEA safeguards regime, and preventing nuclear proliferation. The economic and human costs of the current crisis for Russia, Ukraine, and Europe are evident, but we can't lose sight of the opportunity costs as well. Nowhere are these more vivid than in the nuclear arena. As the world's two largest nuclear powers, the United States and Russia should have a shared sense of responsibility for safeguarding the nuclear order. We will both pay a price, and the wider cause of global nuclear order will be set back significantly if we can't continue to find a way to exercise that shared responsibility to help keep the world safe from nuclear dangers. One of the most serious of those dangers, which continues to serve as a basis for US-Russian cooperation, is the threat posed by Iran's nuclear program. We should have no illusions about Iran's ambitions or its conduct. It's important to embed our approach to the nuclear issue in a wider strategy, which continues to reassure our friends and push back against Iranian behavior threatening many parts of the Middle East, as well as the human rights of its own citizens. While all of these concerns are important and serious, the nuclear issue remains the most urgent, not only because of the way in which a nuclear-armed Iran would multiply exponentially all of these concerns, but also because of the way in which it could unravel the nonproliferation regime. Since his first day in office, President Obama has made very clear that he will do whatever it takes to prevent Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon. He's also emphasized his determination to seek a strong negotiated resolution, which is the best of the alternatives before us. To get there, the administration worked with Congress and international partners to build up leverage, principally through an unprecedented set of sanctions that have dramatically increased the pressures on Iran's economy and leadership. The diplomatic challenge is how to translate that leverage into a strong negotiated agreement that can guarantee the peaceful nature and peaceful future of Iran's nuclear program. The elements of a good deal are pretty clear. A good deal will close off all the pathways Iran has to a nuclear weapon, whether it's through uranium or plutonium production. It will sharply constrain Iran's nuclear program for a long duration. It will set out intrusive monitoring, verification, and inspection procedures that go beyond the requirements of the additional protocol. And it will phase sanctions relief gradually with credible snapback provisions in the event of violations of the agreement. A good deal can credibly deter Iran from nuclear breakout. A good deal can give confidence to our friends and partners that violations will be detected quickly and addressed effectively. A good deal will be embedded within a broader regional strategy that will push back against threatening Iranian behavior. And a good deal can serve as a precedent for building a widely shared international consensus around what distinguishes purely peaceful nuclear programs from those with illegitimate military purposes. Amidst the storm and stress of negotiations with Iran, it's easy to lose sight of the wider implications for the nonproliferation regime. This regime, as all of you know very well, is not self-sustaining. It requires constant renewal and re-examination if it is to continue to serve as the backbone of the global nuclear order in the century unfolding before us. The Iran case has exposed a number of potential vulnerabilities in the treaty. The most significant, in my view, is the absence of a clear definition, a clear firewall between civil and nuclear weapons programs. The gray zone between Article 4 rights and Article 2 prohibitions on the manufacture of nuclear weapons is too wide, making it easier for proliferators to use the cover of nuclear energy programs to pursue nuclear weapons. As nuclear technology and know-how become more diffuse, and as states turn to nuclear power to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions, building this firewall between military and peaceful activities is becoming an increasingly urgent task, the kind of task that demands the foresight and imagination that our leaders demonstrated at earlier moments of testing for the nonproliferation regime. Building a nuclear firewall is obviously much easier said than done. While many states might agree that peaceful nuclear programs should not conduct nuclear tests, enrich uranium beyond 20%, or develop computer codes for modeling what happens when plutonium is compressed by high explosives, others worry that a firewall might limit basic and legitimate research and development or conventional military applications. Both nuclear weapon states and non-nuclear weapon states have a role to play in defining this firewall. Non-nuclear weapon states will likely need to forswear some particularly sensitive activities and provide greater transparency and confidence-building measures around others. And nuclear weapon states will need to sharpen the distinction in their own nuclear programs by making available for IAEA safeguards all civilian nuclear facilities, and over time ceasing practices that blur the line, such as the use of highly enriched uranium for naval nuclear propulsion. It's a tall task, but it shouldn't be impossible. The nuclear landscape may be everything but calm these days, but we've overcome seemingly insurmountable obstacles in the past, and I remain hopeful that we can do so again today. This will require brainpower, leadership, and daring, three qualities that this morning's keynote speaker has in abundance. We're very fortunate that Secretary Moniz has brought his Fall River toughness and MIT smarts to Washington, a city that could always use more of each. And we're especially fortunate that he's agreed to join us this morning. So it's my great privilege to introduce a remarkable colleague and a remarkable public servant, U.S. Secretary of Energy Ernie Moniz.